Hello, and welcome to the Parent Information Center webinar on the early childhood transition. This webinar will take about 45 minutes to review. Following the webinar, you will need to complete a short post-test. If you have any questions, please submit these to us at the end of the post-test. Before we begin, a little bit about the Parent Information Center of Delaware. We were established around 30 years ago, and we are a statewide nonprofit organization to help parents, caregivers, and advocates to secure appropriate education and related services. Our mission is to advance effective parent engagement in education. We have offices in Wilmington and in Georgetown. Some of the services that we have are we provide one-on-one consultations to parents and caregivers where we will speak with you individually about your concerns with your child's education. We also provide learning opportunities in the form of webinars and workshops and audio conferences, in addition to an annual Family Leadership Academy. We have extensive online resources on our website. We have a weekly e-newsletter, and we also have Facebook and Twitter outreach for parents. The learning objectives for this webinar are for you to be able to state two differences between services for children birth through 3 and those 3 to 21 years old, to state the major difference between an IFSP and an IEP, and to identify 3 steps for transitioning to school. People with disabilities have rights and protections under the federal IDEA regulation. IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, was formerly the Education for the Handicapped Act. It was enacted in 1975 to give grants to states for educating children with disabilities. This law has been amended several times, and the final regulations, most recent regulations, have been published in 2006. There are 2 parts to the law. Part C covers children birth through age 3, and Part B is for children ages 3 and up. Part C of the law requires that all children under the age of 3 who have a disability are entitled to get early intervention services. In Delaware, funding for Part C is under Child Development Watch. Child Development Watch falls under the Division of Public Health, which is health-focused. Here you can see the missions of both these organizations. Child Development Watch's mission has 2 parts, really. The first one is working with children who have extra needs to help them develop better. And then the second part is working with the families of these children so that the families are better able to support the children. Please note that Child Development Watch is focused on the whole child as well as their family. In Delaware, any child who is aged birth through 36 months and lives in Delaware must meet the criteria below to be eligible for services from Child Development Watch. A child should be assessed as having a 25% delay in one or more of the following areas. Cognitive, in other words, their ability to learn. Physical means their ability to move, see, or hear. It includes fine motor skills and gross motor skills. The This is where you would have an evaluation by an occupational therapist or a physical therapist, or both. Communication is the ability to understand others and express your needs and wants. It includes the ability to be able to speak as well as to understand spoken language. Social emotional is the ability to have relationships with others, and adaptive is the ability to have basic life skills like dressing, eating, caring for yourself. Child Development Watch may use other service providers to provide some early intervention services, but the CDW is still the program responsible for coordinating all the services and for making sure that these services are developed according to the child's plan. In Delaware, children who've been diagnosed with a physical or mental condition which puts them at risk for developmental delay are placed on a watch and see list. So while they may not be receiving services, their progress is still monitored to be sure that they don't need services up until the age of 3. This is the process that you have gone through to be evaluated and receive services through Child Development Watch. Basically, the child is evaluated for a disability or a developmental delay. If the child is found eligible, then a family service coordinator is assigned, and an Individualized Family Service Plan, or IFSP, is drawn up. Services available are discussed, evaluations are conducted, and the child starts to receive services. Please note that an educator can refer a child to Child Development Watch. Services can be provided in a preschool, in a home setting, or in an outpatient setting. Here are the things that are contained in the IFSP, or the Individualized Family Service Plan. The IFSP is written for the child initially, and the document must be reviewed after 6 months and then revised at least every year. The IFSP has to contain the information that you can see on the slide, and the thing that pertains for us most importantly is the transition services. The IFSP must include the steps to be taken to support transitioning the child from early intervention services or Child Development Watch to special education services under IDEA Part B. So up until the age of 3, your child has been supported in their development through Child Development Watch under Part C of the regulation. Part B of the law is for all school-aged children who have disabilities. When they qualify, they're entitled to get a free, appropriate public education. Please note that Part B is education-focused versus Part C, which addresses the whole early childhood development, including involvement with the family. Under Part B, a child is defined as disabled if they've been evaluated and they meet one of 13 criteria, and because of their disability, they need special education and related services. In other words, their disability hinders them from learning. The criteria for eligibility for Part B in Delaware are for any child aged 3 to 21 years who lives in Delaware, who meets the criteria for one of the 13 classifications. And again, because of their disability, they need special education and related services. We will look at the 13 disability classifications next. Please note, though, that a child who is evaluated and does not meet the criteria for IDEA may still be eligible for accommodations under Section 504 so that they can get equal access to education. This would include accommodations for the curriculum in school, as well as the educational experience in terms of after-school activities, special in-school clubs, and any other activities that a typical peer might engage in school. Coming back to Part B and the 13 classifications, you can see all of the classifications here. As long as the student meets the definition of one of these classifications, they're eligible for special education services. An individualized program is written up for the student to meet their specific educational needs. Here's a little bit more information about the classifications. All the categories cover children from age 3 to 20 or up until their 21st birth date, except developmental delay. For developmental delay, the age of eligibility is from age 3 to 9. And preschool speech delay. Preschool speech delay applies to 3- and 4-year-olds only. It's from the child's 3rd birth date to their 5th birth date. A little bit more information on some of these categories. Autism includes Asperger's and PDD-NOS diagnoses. Learning disability is a difficult one to determine for school-age children. They may have to consider response to intervention first. It's also difficult to meet this criterion if the child is under age 6. So learning disability is not one that a 3-year-old would typically get. Intellectual disability has several subcategories. All of them have to do with cognitive delays. Other health impaired is where kids with ADHD would typically fall. You can see that there is no classification called ADHD. Physical impairments for orthopedic impairment must get in the way of a child's education for the child to be eligible for services. Again, this is very education focused. Typically, students moving from Child Development Watch to school-based services are classified under developmental delay, preschool speech delay, or intellectual disability. Here's the timeline for transitioning from Part C to Part B. Please note that the Family Service Coordinator, who you have for Child Development Watch, is responsible for initiating the transition process. The process starts when the child is between 2 1/4 and 2 3/4 years old. For children who turn 3 between May 1st and December 31st, the parent can choose to transition them to school in September or on their 3rd birthday. If Child Development Watch thinks that the child does not need to transition to Part B, the transition plan must still be drawn up and the child may be transferred to Head Start or other services such as mixed preschool programs in school districts where some children are identified with special needs and some children are not identified. If you are a latecomer to Child Development Watch, in other words, you find out about Child Development Watch and contact them anywhere from 90 to 45 days before a child turns 3, Child Development Watch is still responsible to go ahead and do the evaluation, and transition is discussed right at the first IFSP meeting. If you notify Child Development Watch less than 45 days before your child turns 3, there are no Child Development Watch services, and Child Development Watch refers the child straight to school-based services. If your child is receiving services through Child Development Watch, you should have a trifold called Time to Transition. I encourage you to review this and talk about it with your Family Service Coordinator. There are 3 steps to transitioning from Part C to Part B. The first step is the transition conference, and the Child Development Watch is responsible for this conference. Beyond this, the responsibility transfers to the school district. The eligibility determination and the IEP meeting are the responsibility of the school district. Note that the IEP must be in place before the child's 3rd birthday. So the first step is the transition conference. The purpose of the conference is to take a look at the steps to transition, talk about whether any extra assessments need to be conducted before the child is transitioned to the school. Part B is explained to parents. Also, parents are informed about their procedural safeguards. These are their rights and what they can do if they feel their rights have been violated. And then at the transition conference, the eligibility IEP meeting is scheduled. This is the first time when parents are introduced to the school district. Parents share their child's information and they ask questions. And the school explains the purpose of the eligibility meeting and the IEP meeting. I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about procedural safeguards. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act provides parents with a set of rights called procedural safeguards. These are used by parents when they don't agree with the school or when they feel that their child has not received free, appropriate public education. Procedural safeguards are designed to be sure that the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are upheld, that students with disabilities and their parents are provided with information they need to make informed decisions, and to give families and public agencies a way of resolving disputes. So if you have any questions or any disagreements with the school, I encourage you to review this document. There are several steps you can take to resolve a dispute with the school district. Once the transition conference has been held, the next step is the eligibility determination step. At this step, information is reviewed, including information provided by parents. Based on this information, the school and the parent determine if the child is eligible under any one of those 13 classifications for special education services. The specific classification is determined and decisions are made by consensus of all the members of the team. The school district is responsible to invite all participants to this meeting. This includes parents, at least one special education teacher, at least one regular education teacher, a representative from the district who is qualified to give that specially designed instruction. Most importantly, they're qualified to approve funds to meet any of the students' needs. And also an individual who can interpret the evaluation results. This could be a school psychologist, a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist, anyone who can interpret the results and explain them to the parent. Other people could always be invited by parents or the school district. Please note that the Family Service Coordinator does not have to attend the eligibility determination step. This is really the first meeting where parents attend on their own and they begin to familiarize themselves with the special education process. The next step is the Individualized Education Program, and there is a meeting that has to be held before the child turns 3, and the IEP must be in place before the child turns 3. The IEP identifies the strengths and the special needs of the child. It identifies supports and services to address those needs. Goals and objectives are written to measure progress. And then once these steps are taken, placement is decided based on the child's needs and the least restrictive environment. Please note that the eligibility and IEP meeting are often held at the same time. Again, the IEP must be complete and in place by the child's 3rd birthday. The required members for the IEP team are the same as those for the eligibility team. We talked about providing supports and services. Supports are accommodations. Services are therapies, transportation, counseling, anything else that might be needed to support the child's learning. IDEA requires students to be taught in the least restrictive environment. The goal is for the child with disabilities to be taught with all other children. The school is responsible to provide any supplemental aids, such as accommodations and services, in a general education classroom first, and then only to remove children to a different classroom if they cannot learn in the regular classroom. Again, the school is responsible to provide aids and services within the general education classroom. Here is a summary comparing Part C and Part B. Again, Part C is family-centered, including the child and the child's family, whereas Part B is looking at the child-centered and looking at the child's education. Part C applies for children from birth through age 3. Part B is in general for children from age 3 to 21, although as you saw, there are a couple of classifications where the child is only eligible to a younger age. Part C is administered in Delaware by Child Development Watch, where Part B is administered by the school and school district. When you have Part C, there is a family service coordinator who helps you with any questions you might have. Part B is administered again by the school district, and you deal with the school staff. With Part C, your plan and goals are written in the IFSP, the Individualized Family Service Plan. With Part B, you have the Individualized Education Program, which is an education program for your child. Again, the Family Service Coordinator is responsible for the transition conference, and then beyond that, you will work with the school for eligibility and IEP. Thank you for attending this webinar. I hope you got some good information from it. The next step is to complete a short test. The link for this test will be sent to your email. Please contact us if you have any questions or need advice as you transition to school. And please join us for other workshops and webinars as posted on our website, Facebook, Twitter, and weekly e-newsletters. Many thanks from PIC.